Thank you, Linda. Um, and thank you to your friend who was so honest about how hard things are. So, my Zen Master name is Bon Hae, which means original wisdom, but it sounds like Bonnet, which is the vexation and anger. Um, and I don't know if the person who named me, my dear friend and teacher De Kwang Sanim, was aware of that when he named me that. But there I am with this name, which sounds like anger and vexation. Um, I kind of enjoy that actually. Um, and so, what Wenda said about her friends saying it's okay to be upset and just understand that it will go away. Um, that is actually liberation. Liberation is not never being upset. Liberation is that when we feel grief, when we feel anger, when we feel vexation, when we feel dissatisfaction, when we feel all of these things that arise quite naturally, they don't control us. It also means when we feel happiness, joy, love, all these so called good feelings, that they also don't control us. Liberation means seeing very clearly what the situation is. And our feelings are, in some sense, they're sort of like weather vanes. They point us to which way the wind is blowing. Many of you know that a dear friend of mine just died of COVID on Thanksgiving. And it's very bizarre, the Douglas County puts out this thing, 24 deaths so far, parentheses, one recent. And you read that and oh, that's my friend. My friend is one recent. And so the grief that I feel, it's natural. Why should I not feel it? But if it gets in the way of functioning, then that's a problem. If my grief means I cannot reach out to someone else, then that's where the problem is. So, yeah. So, if you've faced 3 hurricanes and mudslides and mold, and meanwhile it's all happening in the middle of a pandemic, if you went around saying, oh, everything's wonderful, there'd be something wrong with you. But you just do whatever the next thing to do is. That's what we do. We just do the next thing to do. And that's our job. So thank you very much, Wanda, for your Dharma talk. Are there any questions?
Hi.
Wanda!
Yeah, wrong name. Well, we're having some Zoom problems this morning. I didn't have time to correct it, so I'll have to be Wenda for a little while and then I can
I
change.
think I can change it actually. Yes, I can. Bingo.
So easy. Well, I was going to ask a question about identity, but you already answered that. So I wonder if you can uh, talk about or so how important is, outside of the obvious and required in out, how important is some kind of regular or controlled breath pattern to our sitting meditation? I mean, do you need to adopt, something more extensive than in out?
I don't. So there are many forms of meditation practice, and some of them, including Zen meditation, some of them involve control of the breath. You count how long your in breaths are, you count how long your out breaths are. You pay very close attention to the movements of your diaphragm, the movements of your stomach muscles, that sort of thing. And then I tend towards the breathe naturally school. It is important that your in-breath is roughly half the length of your out-breath, but this will happen naturally as you do it. And then it's also important that, well, you can't see it here, but if I put my hands here, you breathe in by your stomach going out and you breathe out by your stomach going in. So you create a vacuum that gets filled and then you push the air out. That's also important. And so in that sort of sense, we have sort of two kinds of controlled breathing that we do, but it doesn't have to be rigorous, and it doesn't have to take up our consciousness, and it doesn't have to be something that we focus on. It's just something that in the beginning you should pay attention to, and then it becomes very natural. There are people who are concerned about how fast they breathe. So most beginners, when they start meditation, they breathe about 5 or 6 breaths a minute. And as you begin to become more familiar with it and you begin to sink into it, on a retreat, I might do like 3 breaths a minute. My husband, who is the great pranayama specialist, will do 2 breaths a minute. But it's not, at least on my part, it's not conscious. It just happens naturally. So I'm a great believer in this expression of my teacher, by natural process. But yes, you should, especially in the beginning, have a certain awareness. You should be aware that your breathing is not coming from here. Lord knows it's not coming from here, but it's coming from here. That your stomach muscles move, and that lets your diaphragm drop, and that creates a vacuum, and then the breath comes in, and then your stomach muscles come in, and then that sends the air out. That's certainly something everyone should be aware of. And everyone should be aware that the in-breath, my teacher used to say 3 counts in, 7 counts out. That's not a hard and fast rule, but roughly half as long the in-breath as the out-breath. But you don't have to focus on it unless that is your meditation practice. Unless your meditation, Stan has a number of meditation practices that he does in which focusing on the breath is a really big part of it. But it's like we have mantra practice, we have Hua Do practice, we have all kinds of practices, right? And breath practices, all kinds of practices. Sometimes you can combine breath practice with mantra practice, many, many practices. And the question is, what in this moment of your life fits you? It's like clothing. It's not what's good for you or what's bad for you. It's what fits you. What, when you do it, you say, yeah. Like I put in this sweater and I say, yeah. And if I put in one of Stan's sweaters, I say, oh, it's way too big. Because he's got really big shoulders. I got really small shoulders. So it's just like that. It's like what fits. And if it fits, do it. And if it doesn't fit, don't do it. And over a long lifetime, I've been practicing for how long? 44 years. Slightly over 44 years and 6 weeks roughly. And if Zen practice, and before that I had 2 years of practicing on my own. So, over that long a period of time, your practice will shift. And a practice that at one point didn't fit, suddenly it fits. It's like you lose weight, you gain weight, and then suddenly this shirt doesn't fit and that shirt does fit, Never throw out your old clothes because you'll never know when they'll fit again. So, so it's like that with practice. So over my 44 years of Zen practice, I've probably done about 5 or 6 different styles of practice. And that's fine. But you don't jump from one to another. You have one practice and you keep it for a really long time. I know I've drifted from your question, but you have one practice and you do it for a really long time, like months or years. And then if suddenly you find that it somehow doesn't fit, and that's the best word I have for it, you'll know when a practice fits and a practice doesn't fit. If you find it doesn't fit and another practice appears, do that practice. But don't jump around, because if you jump around, then no practice has a chance to settle in. It's like a drop, in a cave, and it drops and drops and drops and makes a hole in the rock below. But if that drop were over like a conveyor belt, and it dropped and then the thing moved, dropped, and the thing moved, dropped, and then, no rock would ever get a hole in it, right? So you have to keep doing the same practice for quite a while, and then, before you even consider changing it. So that's my answer to your question and other questions that might arise related to your question, and there might be still more. So thank you very much for your question. Are there any other questions?
I have a question, Judy. Related, Wendy's talk was making me think, well, if it's like a bad day, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
practice is just as valuable, because I was surprised that her friend would even try when a hurricane's bearing down on you. So many of the problems, and sometimes I think, well, why bother? Meditation's going to be bad today because my mind will be everywhere else. But then Wenda's talk made me think, well, you should just do it anyway. Is that right? Or
Yes. And to elaborate on that, absolutely. In fact, if a hurricane is really bearing down on you, for God's sake, take shelter. Don't sit there.
yeah.
But yeah, so when our life is really, really difficult, and then we sit, and one of two things will happen. One thing that happens, maybe for a moment, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for the whole session, although that's doubtful, you might have this clarity. You might be able to step outside of your problem and your sadness and your anger or whatever it is. You might be able to step outside of that. That's wonderful. But what usually happens, as we all know, is that all these things that are roiling your mind, they keep roiling your mind, but you can't do anything about it. For that 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever you've said, I'm going to sit on this cushion or in the chair or wherever you're sitting, for that period of time, you can't send off an email, you can't make a phone call, you can't, do whatever you were going to do, you can't, do something with your bank account. You can't do anything. You're just sitting there. And all this stuff is whirling, and you can really see it. Oh, look at it. So instead of this stuff telling you what to do and you obediently go and do it, which is what happens most of the time. I'm so angry, and then you yell at somebody or, whatever. Defriend someone on Facebook, whatever. You can tell I'm old. I should have said unfriend. Anyway, you can't act. You can't act on that feeling. And same for positive feelings. We always talk about negative feelings. Positive feelings are the same. You really love someone. You realize, oh, I really love this person. But, you can't go bug them about how much you love them. You're just sitting there. And you have the chance to see, oh, look at that. Look at that right there. Oh, I can see it, because you can't do anything about it. So those periods of time when we're under tremendous stress and strain and upset, sit. Absolutely sit. It's not about getting rid of those feelings. It's about recognizing them. Recognize them for what they are, which is insubstantial and made up, but also useful, because everything's insubstantial and made up, and some things are useful. So it allows us to see these things and not be trapped by them. So absolutely. And we have some practices which are good in sort of cutting through difficult feelings. I don't like to say negative, difficult feelings, in the sense that they can help those feelings abate somewhat. And that's prostrations and chanting, because those are physical. And it's just like people who run long runs, like 5-10 miles, marathons. If you keep doing that kind of thing for a long period of time, this physical action, you discover that your difficult feelings somewhat subside. It's like there's sort of no room for them. So prostrations, if in the traditional thing in Korea, is if you go to a Zen teacher and you say, my wife has left me, my child is in jail, my mother is just died, I lost my job, what can I do? And they'll say 1,000 prostrations a day. And yeah, if you do that, then the space in your mind that's being taken up by all this stuff starts being taken up by, can I get through this? It's like all the endorphins or whatever it is that your body creates when you do, intense physical exercise, they appear. And so yeah, but it's not like running, because it also has this kind of, I hate to use the word spiritual focus. You're doing prostrations, which is different, that has this spiritual aspect to it, which running doesn't have. It's not about you. Prostrations are not about you. Similarly, chanting. You know, whether it's the 4 regular chants that I guess about a quarter or a third of you guys don't know, because you haven't practiced in a Zen center physically, and we don't do some of them over on Zoom, or whether it's Kwansim Bosal or Jijang Bosal. Jijang Bosal it's a brilliant thing, to have a practice that when someone close to you dies, and you do this for 49 days, you do Jijang Bosal chanting, and so for 49 days, and there are people here now who are doing it for people that they love who have recently died, and you do that, and what happens is, your you see your grief transmute itself, and you see your relationship to this person transmute itself, and it's a very natural thing. You're not trying to do anything, you're just doing Jijang Bosal. We usually do it with a moktak if we can. Jijang Bosal, like that. Or you can do it just vocally. But it's this thing, in Judaism we have Kaddish that you say for 11 months after someone dies. Jijang Bosal is 49 days. And it's like this constant, it's like a pole, a pillar. And that it's like a mirror, and you walk in front of it every day, and every day what you see changes, but that doesn't change. It's a wonderful practice and process to go through. It has a lot of wisdom to it. But chanting in general, you can do Thousand Eyes and Hands Sutra every day or something, and chanting in general, and again, because it's physical, it sets up this physical stuff going on. So prostrations and chanting are things that can help actually transmute whatever the difficult emotions are. Sitting allows us to see them clearly, and it's hard because you get wrapped up in it. I mean, it's really hard to sit there, and you get wrapped up, and you want to whatever it is, but you just sit there, and gradually, it you begin to see their true nature. One thing, if the feelings are really overwhelming, one thing that I find helpful is to interrogate them. Like you're a detective and they're a suspect, right? What are you made of? What is your substance? That's something that I find helpful. What is your substance? In any obsessive thinking, what is your substance? So I find that very helpful. But yeah, we live with our life as it is, and sometimes it involves things that are not pleasant. Right now, for a lot of people, it's involving a lot of stuff that's not pleasant, whether it's not pleasant in its presence or not pleasant in its absence. We're all going through stuff right now. And to not be controlled by it, and to recognize it, not try to push it down, not try to shove it away, but just, oh yeah, I know you, yeah. And then whatever wisdom is in that, because sometimes there's a lot of wisdom in these so-called negative emotions, we can take that wisdom, but we're not pushed around by it. So thank you very much for your question. Yeah. I should add one more thing. There's some people who only practice when their life is hard. I don't see anyone here like that, but in the past there have been a lot of people. It's like, someone gets a divorce and they show up at the Zen Center for 6 months. They get a boyfriend, so they're not at the Zen Center for a couple of years. Then they lose that boyfriend, so they come back to the Zen Center. You know, Zen Center is not just for when you're having a hard time. Practice is always, whether you're having a hard time or a difficult time, always practice. No problem. So thank you. And we've run out of time for questions. So we need to turn off